Thanks for joining. We'll get started here in a couple, 3 minutes. See if who joins. Just say hey in the comments so I know who you are and that you're here. It doesn't always show up on my feed when I'm doing these unless somebody comments. Hey, Sierra, thanks for joining. We get started in about 2 or 3 minutes here. Thanks everybody for joining. Feel free to say hello in the comments if you want. We're just going to give it another minute or two for a few more people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm sorry about the terrible the reflection of the computer on my glasses. I really don't know how to get rid of that, so. Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for joining tonight. Hi, Katie. Sierra. Thanks very much. That was my goal, to be gorgeous. I'm just going to give it 1 more minute here. I know people usually will join a little bit late as they come across it on the feed. Feel free to tag any of your friends you think would enjoy this. I would appreciate it. Definitely not trying to go viral with this, that's for sure, but want to hopefully help as many people as possible, and hopefully it'll benefit them. Tonight we're going to be talking about slowing down, and feel like my life is rushed and hurried like a lot of you. I was out for a walk, took a walk on my break. I work at home, if you don't know, and I was out for a walk and I was just feeling so tense because I was feeling like just work is super busy all the time, my day job. And now I have a second job. So that adds to the hurriedness of everything. And you guys can probably relate to that. It just feels like you're always rushed to the next thing to do. And if while you're doing the thing you're doing, you're thinking about the next thing that you have to do. So it gets kind of crazy. And it's just difficult when your life is rushed and you've got so much going on. It just seems like I said, for me personally, my regular job isn't necessarily rushed. I'm not on any kind of production standard, but it's almost implied that you've got to get things done quickly because you've got so many things that need to be done every day. There's deadlines and so forth. And then I just started as part-time job at Walmart. Hey, Terry. Just started part-time at Walmart as a cashier. Easy job, but still, like when it's busy and the customers are in line and you see those people backing up and you feel rushed to get things moved on. So you always have that kind of that tense feeling. And then it's like, even when you're, on the weekends, if you're on vacation, you feel that way sometimes. You're like, you have this long list of things that you want to do. And these are good things and these are fun things. But don't you feel like sometimes it's just like, oh man, it's just like, we've got to get through this fun activity so we can get on to the next fun activity. And it leaves that just tenseness in you all the time. And for those of you who are parents, sometimes you feel, well, not sometimes, probably all the time, or even as a grandmother, Terry, I know, it's just like there's just always somebody vying for your attention. You're always being rushed all the time. There's just so many things to do. And so today I want to talk a little bit about that and why it's important as Christians and just as people in general that we kind of just slow down enough to make time for God, let alone just time enough to breathe and to relax. And I think we just put a lot of pressure on ourselves, we're always up against the clock and there's some sort of deadline in life. And unfortunately, the world runs on clocks and calendars and stuff needs to be done, right? It's just an inevitable fact of life. But God has designed us to need rest. All right. We know that. If you're a believer, you understand that. Hopefully you do. He created the Sabbath. God created the world in 6 days, and on the seventh day, it says that he rested. So I'm going to ask you to give me just 1 minute. I just need to get a cough drop. I'll be right back. All right, thanks. Sorry about that. It says, God created the world in 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he rested. So even God knew he needed to rest. And then we read in the New Testament, it said one day, or one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along, and they began to pick some heads of grain. And the Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, said to him, "Look, why are they doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath?" And he answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? And in the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered into the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. And then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." So what is the Sabbath? The Sabbath is basically a concept, again, originating in the creation story in the Bible, in the narrative found in Genesis. Like I said, after 6 days of creation, God rested on the seventh day, and it said he sanctified it, or he set it apart, he made it holy. And in Genesis 2:2-3, it says, "And by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on that day, he rested from all his work. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on that day, he rested from all the work of creation that he had accomplished." And Jesus emphasized the Sabbath's intent as a blessing for humanity, not necessarily a burden. Like in the Old Testament, it had been almost a burden. People felt like they had to stick to that strictness of resting on the Sabbath. But there's a couple things that we need to realize. And one thing is that our rest that we need, it's found in Jesus, okay? He says in Matthew 11:28, come to me all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And then the next verse says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. In Psalm 46:10, we read, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And the emphasis there is be still and know that I am God. In Psalm 135, we read, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. And then like throughout the Psalms, you'll see sometimes the word Selah, S-E-L-A-H. And it's used throughout all the Psalms, but it's to denote a pause for reflection. And so when you read the Bible, you shouldn't just rush through it to read it. You literally should just read a little bit, little bites and chunks, if you will, and then pause, reflect on it, pray about it, think about it. It wasn't intended for us to just take it all in and just read as much as we can. And it's funny because in our church right now, we're kind of doing a challenge between the men and the women, read the Bible through the year to see if more men or more women do it. I know the women are probably going to win, and that means the men are going to have to cook them breakfast next year. But anyhow, I will admit that because there's probably more women in our church than men, and women are usually more devoted to the Lord, honestly, than men are, unfortunately, in the church. It shouldn't be that way, but it's true. But I think about that because, like today I was reading from Genesis and I had 3 chapters to read. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, this is getting long and it was getting kind of boring. And, I'm just doing it to get through it and not really absorbing what I should from it. So sometimes we just need to pause, slow down a little bit. It says in Philippians, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And I think we need that. We need to pause and don't be anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, how am I going to get this done? How am I going to get that done? Just kind of try to live in the moment. Another thing is Jesus, okay? Think about this. Jesus himself even knew enough to slow down, to take a rest. In Mark 6:31, we read, and then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. Sometimes you just need to escape from everything, from all the chaos and the people. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that means maybe it's family. And especially for you moms out there and you grandmothers and stuff. And even maybe you, I don't know who's listening, but you're single dads. But, you need to sometimes get away from those kids, don't you? And I've heard some moms say sometimes the only place of peace they have is when they go into the bathroom. And then their kids are even still banging on the door, trying to get in. So I kind of feel bad for you because it's very difficult with little ones to get away. But wherever you can find that peace and make that peace, you need to. Katie, what are you saying wow to? I gotta see what she's commenting wow to. But then it says, again in Mark 1:35, very early in the morning while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place, and he prayed. And then in another verse in Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So Katie was saying you need to get away from your child. But it's true, Katie, because one day you're going to have kids and you're going to understand when they're screaming and yelling all the time and constantly yelling your name. And it's like you love them to death, but sometimes you just need a little break. So I know you'll appreciate that one day. I just know you will. But I think that one of the most important things we need to slow down for is that we risk missing important things. And there's a Proverb 19:2 that says, desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? And I thought about that. It's like that's kind of true because sometimes we're in such a hurry. I think we miss out on blessings and we miss out on things that are possibly right in front of us. There's some more Proverbs here I want to read through about that. It says in Proverbs 21:5, it says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And I think of that. I think about if you do a job in a hurried way, You might lose your job if you don't do it with quality. Quality to me is more important than quantity. And unfortunately, I think all of us have worked in some kind of jobs where it was all about quantity. I mean, you're getting the customer out the door, or if you work in a factory, getting X number of pieces done. Even in my world where I've worked in insurance my whole life, when you process claims, it was about how many claims could you do in a day? Or if you're on the phone, how many customers can you get, to get off the phone every day? How many calls can you take? It's always like numbers, and not a lot of focus on quality always. So another proverb, 19:11, a person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. And I like this verse, and I know you're familiar with this story, but it's from 1 Kings 19:12, and it said, after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire came a gentle whisper. And prior to that, there was a bunch of other big things that happened, but it said that it was the gentle whisper of God, that came. And it's not about in this big, bold way. Sometimes you have to quiet your life down. You need to kind of listen a little bit, and you need to hear God's voice. And it brings me to a story about Martha and Mary, the sisters. When Jesus came to see him, Martha and Mary were Lazarus' sisters, okay? And Jesus was coming to pay them a visit. And the scripture says Martha, meaning, had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and she asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you're worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. So what did Mary do? Mary sat down at the feet of Jesus. Did these preparations need to be made for Jesus coming? Absolutely. It's like, I don't think Jesus was saying that those weren't good things that Martha was doing, but more that Mary chose the better thing to pause, to calm down, to sit at the feet of the Lord. And that's what we need to do sometimes. I think of that in a church. There are a lot of things that make a church run. There's a lot of important things, from those who clean the church, to those who sing in the worship team, to those who teach Sunday school, to those who greet people at the door, okay? All important things, okay? But sometimes the most important thing is just to stop and listen to the Lord, just to worship him and to praise him and to be in his presence, just to simply be in his presence. And we can't do that when we're constantly hurried and worried about the next thing. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is about staying focused on today. There's a reason in the Lord's Prayer that Jesus focused on daily bread. Give us this day our daily bread. And then he says in Matthew 6:34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Like, we're sitting here so worried about what we're going to do later in the day, tomorrow, this weekend, next week, making plans for this and that. And we miss what's right in front of us. Sometimes the best things are what's in front of us. Do you guys remember COVID, when we went through COVID? And that was crazy. Like, I'm sure you definitely remember COVID. It was awful. And we were kind of forced to slow down. The world was forced to slow down. And because people, they weren't rushing off to school. Kids had to stay home and be homeschooled. That means parents had to stay home. A lot of people went from working in the office or wherever to working at home, if you could. Families were forced into togetherness. Pets were loving it. These people that normally were away now were home all day, and their pets started to love that they were home. And at first, I don't think we knew how to handle that, that togetherness and that slowing down, because we're always so hurried. If you had a family with kids, your kids are always running off to sports and different things and so forth. And now we're like stuck at home with each other. And what is there to do? Well, read a book, do play some games together, go to the park together. We were able to go out and do things still, but not around other people. And I began to see story after story on Facebook about how nice it was to slow down finally and just enjoy their families and their friends. And and just to have some peace and so forth. So COVID taught us, I think, an important lesson is the importance of sometimes we just need to slow down. And I think sometimes we rush ourselves to the point where maybe God forces us to slow down through illness or through other problems. I'm not saying that he always does that or if God brought COVID upon us for that. But I think that God uses all of these types of things for us. And there's a quote I read tonight. It said, death is just nature's way of telling you to slow down. And that's kind of scary to think about that. But it's kind of true because sometimes we rush ourselves into stress, which leads often to illness because our immune systems break down when we're rushed and anxious and so forth. So don't be forced into slowing down by the nature that comes from, being too overly anxious and stuff and stressed out. So I'm going to read a little story I read also that I thought was great. It's a parable written by Leo Tolstoy, and it kind of reminds us to slow down. I want you to pay close attention to this, okay? It goes like this. It says, there once was a king who believed that if he could find the answers to 3 questions, he would never make a mistake again. And the questions were simple, yet they were impossible. The first question, what is the right time to begin any task? The second question was, who are the right people to listen to? And the third question he asked is, what is the most important thing to do? So again, what's the right time to begin a task? Who are the right people to listen to? And what's the most important thing to do? So he went to scholars and he went to priests, he went to wise men, and their answers were thoughtful, but they all disagreed. One told him the right time is always tomorrow to plan ahead. That'd be me, the procrastinator. While another insisted the right time is right now, act immediately. And then another said the most important thing is science or prayer or courage or strategy. Well, the king grew tired of the noise, so he decided to visit a hermit who lived deep in the forest, a man known less for his brilliance and more for his presence. When the king arrived, the hermit was digging in the earth with a simple spade. He was frail and old, and the work looked exhausting. The king approached him. I've come to ask you 3 questions, he said. The hermit did not answer. Instead, he kept digging slow, deliberate strokes. So the king took the spade from him and began to dig himself, helping the man complete the work. Hours passed, and suddenly a man staggered out of the woods, clutching his stomach, bleeding badly. The king and the hermit rushed to him. They cleaned the wound, stopped the bleeding, and carried the man inside. The king cared for him through the night. By morning, the wounded man opened his eyes and whispered, "Forgive me." The king was confused. The man explained that he had once been his enemy and had planned to ambush him on his journey. But when the king didn't return, the man went searching, was wounded by the king's guards, and stumbled toward the hermit's hut where the king himself saved his life. The man wept. The king forgave him and promised to send him home healed and cared for. When the visitor left, the king finally turned back to the hermit. I must know the answers to my question, he said. The hermit looked up from his work and smiled. You've already been shown the answers, he said. The right time is the only time that exists, the moment that you are in. Had you not stayed and helped me dig, you wouldn't have met the wounded man. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, none of it matters more than now. The right people are the ones who are with you in the present moment. Had you not attended the wounded man, you might still be enemies. And the most important thing is to do good for the person in front of you, for this alone is what life requires in the moment. The king stood still, the forest was quiet, the sun slipped through the trees in thin golden lines, and for the first time in a long while, he felt peaceful. Katie, you're funny. Katie, my daughter, said she's now anxious about her anxiety. You are a chip off the old block. So I thought that was a really impertinent story to this and this is a hard thing to do. It's hard for me, being present in the moment, like just being present with the people who are in front of you. I'm guilty of this as much as the next person is. You go out to dinner with somebody and you're both on your cell phones and looking at Facebook and social media. You're sitting down even to watch TV together and you're watching TV on your cell phone. And it's like you're not present with people, and we need to be present. And I think the biggest thing is we miss out is being present with the Lord. Sometimes, we've talked about this in our church too, in our Sunday school, just about praying and how, you pray, but you come to God with this long laundry list of requests, and that's fine. We're to bring all our petitions and our prayers to him, and he loves that and wants that. But how often do we ever just sit in God's presence and just listen? And it's hard to do. You try to close your eyes and listen, and it's next thing you know, you're thinking about other things and worrying about things and dozing off. But I guess the thing I would hope that you would get out of this is to try to live more in the present moment. And if you're wondering maybe why your spiritual life, with the Lord is not where it should be, maybe because you're just too hurried. You need to slow down. And sometimes that means you've got to take a really long, hard look at what's going on in your life. You've got to ask yourself, okay, I've got this, this, and this that I have to do this week or every day or every week, whatever it is. How much of that, how is that really important? Sometimes you've got to eliminate things. And I know you don't want to disappoint your kids if you've got kids involved in things, or you don't want to disappoint other people or spouses or boyfriends or girlfriends, husbands, wives, whoever it may be. You don't want to say no to your friends, but sometimes you just have to say no to your friends. You have to say no to your family even. And you've got to say yes to you, and you've got to say yes to the Lord. And I think the most important thing, the best change I made in my life 2 or 3 years ago now, was making a deliberate plan to get up every morning. And the first thing I do, well, not the first thing, but close to the first thing, is to sit down with God, to spend time reading the Word, doing my devotions, praying. And it started off with 5 minutes. That's it. That's all it was, like 5 minutes every day. And next thing I know, it was 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And now it's generally, and I'm not saying this that you have to do this, or I'm not bragging, but now it's like sometimes anywhere between an hour and an hour and a half in the morning, spend time with God. Now, the days that I get up late and that happens, or the days I don't do that, my day is markedly different and worse than it is on those days when I'm doing those things. But I'm still struggling like you, and this is why I'm doing this devotion tonight, is I still struggle with the whole, slowing things down a little bit, especially in my mind, slowing my brain down, because my mind's always thinking ahead. And my daughter, Katie, mentioned about she's anxious about her anxiety, but there's some truth to that, because sometimes when I'm at peace and I'm not worrying about something, I'm wondering, there must be something I should be worried about. This isn't normal. Have you ever felt that way? Like, it's like your anxiety kind of subsides and you're like, wait a minute. It's like you start worrying. It's like, why am I not anxious? It's like there's got to be something I'm supposed to be anxious about. Oh, we definitely need to get through that. It's hard, but by the grace of God, all of this is possible. I've experienced it. I've witnessed it. I wouldn't be on here. Is it hard sometimes? Yes, but just this week, the rest of this week, next week, try to be present in the moment, present with the people that you're with. Slow down, make time for the Lord, okay, and listen. Don't talk so much. That time you would normally pray and put all your requests, God knows what you need. Just stop and say, God, I'm here to listen to you. I'm here. I want to know, what do you have for me? What do you want to say to me? And you might be shocked and surprised. The things you've been praying about for months or years, all of a sudden it's like, boom, the answer's there. Remember that verse we read from 2 Kings, trying to find it here. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire came a gentle whisper. So make room for that gentle whisper from God this week, and just slow down and be quiet. So that is all I have this week. Hopefully I will be on next week. Hope to be Wednesday. Again, I have to double check my second job work schedule, but it'll definitely be one night next week, hopefully near the middle of the week. Again, if you guys have anything that you want topically to discuss or talked about, or a Bible study done, just leave a message in here, shoot me a message on Messenger, and I will be more than happy to discuss it. So I hope you guys all have a blessed night, and slow down a little bit, okay? Thanks. Good night.